Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I began to suspect that something was wrong with my wife, Linda. It wasn't obvious at first, but after knowing her for 17 years, 15 of which we had been married, I started to notice changes. We live a typical Scandinavian life. Our home is cozy, located not far from the county center, and we have 2 children, an 8-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. We both work full-time, she at the town hall, and I in a small consulting firm. Our relationship started off normally. We met during evening classes on advanced Microsoft Excel, and 2 years later, we got married. Like any marriage, we had our ups and downs, but I never considered them out of the ordinary. At least, that's what I thought. It wasn't until 2 months after our 15th anniversary that I began to notice something was off. Linda became less interested in intimacy, not entirely distant, but instead of sharing meaningful moments together, she preferred brief, detached touches. Then there was another shift. She started spending more money on clothes, which was unusual for her. Additionally, she became uncharacteristically critical, nitpicking me over trivial things. This wasn't like her. Linda always enjoyed spending a couple of nights a week with her friends, doing aerobics or playing badminton. Occasionally, there were nights when one of her friends wanted to celebrate something, but those instances were rare. I started paying closer attention to her actions, but didn't notice anything unusual in her routine. One day, my colleague Eric noticed my mood and pointed out that I seemed troubled, especially concerning my marriage. He suggested that it's better to know the truth than to continue feeling uneasy. I admitted that I had thought about hiring a private detective to figure out what was going on, but 2 serious obstacles stood in my way. First, there were no private detectives in our area, or even the entire county. Second, even if there were, I didn't have the money to pay for their services. Nevertheless, I assured Eric that I would do everything I could to figure out what was happening between me and Linda. The turning point came on a Saturday, shortly after my conversation with Eric. We were invited to dinner at friends who lived just outside the city. The whole evening, Linda was her usual affectionate self, and even during the taxi ride home, she remained warm and attentive. Naturally, I hoped the night might end with intimacy, but as soon as we got home and the babysitter left, her behavior changed. She coldly said, "If you were expecting something tonight, forget about it." Frustrated, I forced a smile. What else could I expect from a wife who had become so distant? I didn't push the issue, but I struggled to fall asleep that night. Lying in bed, I began to formulate a plan. By Sunday morning, I had signed up for an anonymous email service. After testing it out, I sent the following message to Linda's work email on Monday. "Dear Mrs. Ekman, I regret to inform you that I have evidence of your affair. While this is sad for your husband, I admire your lover for spending time with such a beautiful woman. However, I'm willing to remain silent if you meet my demands. I want you to sit alone at the Crab Cafe today, Monday, from 4:30 p.m. to 5 p.m., with an envelope containing $1,000. A friend will approach and ask, 'Aren't you Alexander's sister?' You must reply, 'No, I am his wife,' and hand over the envelope. Your true friend." I deliberately chose $1,000. Not too much to seem like serious blackmail, but not too little for her to withdraw without attracting attention. That Monday, I casually suggested to Eric that we take a long coffee break at the Crab Cafe. He agreed, and we arrived just before 4:30 p.m. To my surprise, Linda was there, sitting alone at a table. What shocked me even more was seeing Martin Miller, one of her colleagues from the town hall, sitting a few tables away from her. Martin, who is married to one of Linda's closest friends, had been with us at dinner the previous Saturday, and I hadn't noticed anything unusual between him and Linda at the time. Overcome with rage, I couldn't contain myself. I shouted across the cafe, "What's going on here? Why are both of you here, not at work? And why aren't you sitting together if you're both free?" Martin immediately stood up and left without saying a word. Linda, following his example, also walked out silently, leaving me alone to process the scene that had just unfolded. When I told Eric that we might have caught Linda with another man, he was just as puzzled as I was. Wasting no time, I called Martin's wife, Cecilia, to see if she could shed some light on why both my wife and her husband had taken the day off and ended up in the same cafe, sitting apart from each other. I voiced my suspicions, saying that if I didn't hear a convincing explanation, I would be certain that Linda was cheating on me, and that Martin was probably involved. Cecilia promised to talk to Martin and let me know what she found out. Martin was a charming man, always impeccably dressed, polite, and known for being the life of any gathering. But for those of us who had known him for years, Martin looked quite different. Later that evening, when I got home, I checked our bank account and noticed a suspicious withdrawal of $1,000, which had been returned on the same day. This only fueled my doubts, but I had other concerns on my mind. Earlier, during my lunch break, I had gone to the courthouse to pick up divorce papers. I sat down and started filling them out, realizing that my next steps were becoming clearer. When Linda returned home, she was furious. "You made a fool of yourself at the cafe!" she shouted. "I can explain everything if you just let me speak," she continued, but I had no patience. "I'm tired of hearing excuses," I responded coldly. "Here are the divorce papers. Just sign them. The terms are fair. You'll get half of everything, and no lawyer will get you more without costing you more than it's worth." Linda's anger only grew, and she snapped, "That's the first smart thing you've done in a while." Without looking at the details, she angrily signed the papers and spat, "It'll be a relief to be with a real man and not you." That was the end of it. She stormed out of the house, and I didn't care where she went. Later that night, Cecilia called me, crying. Martin had broken down and confessed to the affair with Linda. He begged her for forgiveness, but Cecilia didn't know what to do. She told him to stay with his parents for a couple of weeks while she made her decision. I informed her that Linda and I had already signed the divorce papers, and that was that. Although I knew Linda's fantasy of Martin as her knight in shining armor was ridiculous, I kept those thoughts to myself. After the call, I gathered all of Linda's belongings and moved them into the guest room. When Linda came home and saw what I had done, she exploded with anger. I mentioned that I had told Cecilia about what I had seen at the cafe. As expected, this only made her angrier. The next day, something unexpected happened. When I got home from work, Linda approached me, her tone softened. "Alexander," she began, "I'm so sorry for what I said yesterday. I was stressed and said things I didn't mean. You're the one I truly love, and I regret what happened. Can we please get through this? We're adults, and we can work it out. Just tear up the divorce papers, and I'll explain everything." I looked her in the eyes and said, "The papers are already filed in court, and for your information, I'm fully aware of your affair with Martin. After you left yesterday, he confessed everything to Cecilia, and she called me. Your so-called real man turned out to be a sobbing mess, begging for forgiveness and claiming that you seduced him. Doesn't sound like much of an upgrade, does it?" Linda's expression changed, and she stammered, "Did Cecilia really tell you about me and Martin?" "Yes," I confirmed. "And now everything makes sense. I suspected it for a while, but I didn't have proof until Martin confessed." With a confused look on her face, she asked, "But how did you make me sign the divorce papers before Cecilia told you about the affair?" I sighed. "I made that decision last Saturday. After a long, sleepless night, I realized that divorce was the only way out. By the time Martin confessed, the days of Martin flaunting his flashy image with expensive watches and driving around in a luxury car are over, the very symbols of wealth he once used to dazzle those around him. If it was these material things that caught your attention, now is the time to reconsider. If you have genuine feelings for this spineless man, soon you'll have to foot the bill for his extravagant whims." In response, she said, "I made a serious mistake that I can never justify. I allowed myself to be seduced and misled by this lying snake. I would rather spend the rest of my life alone than be near him again." Soon, rumors spread that Martin was furious when Cecilia told him that she had filed for divorce and made it clear that their marriage was beyond repair. This might explain why the day after the divorce papers were signed, Linda came to me in tears, asking for forgiveness and begging me to reconsider my decision. Ever since Martin saw me in the cafe, he had been avoiding any encounters. The day after his confession, The doctor put him on medical leave due to stress and related health issues. As I had expected, 2 weeks later, Cecilia also filed for divorce, and Martin never returned to his job at City Hall. He stayed on medical leave for several months and then left the city, taking a new job elsewhere. After that, Martin and Linda never saw each other again, not even for a brief conversation. Linda found an apartment in a shabby neighborhood, though it took 3 months to complete the paperwork. During this time, we agreed that she would stay in the guest room of our house, and neither of us would start new relationships until the divorce was finalized. Despite the tension, this arrangement worked out better than we had expected. Then, a couple of months after filing for divorce, something unexpected happened with Linda. One Saturday evening, she approached me with a request to keep an important financial matter secret. I agreed, and she confessed, "You've probably heard that someone in town recently won the lottery. Well, that winner is me. I won $5 million, more than enough to solve all my problems." Since we were still legally married, she asked, "Are you going to claim half?" I replied, "Congratulations. No, I don't want a penny. I don't expect anything from you. My only advice is to set aside some money for the kids, for their education, future homes, cars, and help when they decide to marry." She looked at me as if surprised. "You really won't take a penny?" she asked again. "Yes. When we were together, all I ever wanted was your love. But I have a feeling that when Martin finds out about this, he'll come crawling to you, begging for forgiveness." She reassured me. "He'll never know. You're the only one who has this information, and you promised to keep it a secret." Then she added, "Despite the promises I broke to you, I know that you're a better person than I am, and will keep yours." That was the end of our conversation, and life returned to its usual cold rhythm. Linda left town for a few days that same week, returning on Saturday. That evening, she asked if we could have dinner together, as she had something important to discuss. I agreed. Our children were spending the night at friends' houses. The dinner was incredible. My favorite dishes and excellent wine, which immediately raised my suspicions. I began to think that this was some kind of gesture to win back my love, and I wondered how she had calculated the price of my forgiveness. When we moved on to dessert, she shared the first news. "I followed your advice and created trust funds for our children." I replied, "You are a wonderful mother. These funds will be a huge help for them in the future." We moved on to lighter topics, chatting about everyday things. Eventually, we settled on the couch, sipping coffee and brandy, when she said the following: "I want to apologize for being such a fool. A cheap, naive idiot who destroyed our family by betraying and humiliating the best man I've ever known." She continued, "To this day, I can't explain why I allowed Martin to lead me astray so easily. I deeply regret it, and there hasn't been a single night where I haven't despised myself for my stupidity. I know that money can't buy your forgiveness or love, but I also know that courts often award compensation for emotional distress. Since no court would consider what I've done to you, I've decided to be my own prosecutor, judge, and jury, and I've ruled that all the money left after setting up the children's funds is yours." I was in shock. "What have you done?" I finally asked. "I can't accept your money. I'll give it back." She shook her head firmly. "You can't give it back. The lawyers I hired to arrange all this have ensured that it's legally yours, without any conditions. I don't expect anything in return, and I have no regrets. I'm not asking for anything, and I don't want anything. This is simply what I had to do before I allowed myself to get involved in that foolish affair with Martin. What else could I have done? My love wasn't a commodity, and Linda wasn't trying to buy it. She didn't set conditions or make demands, and she didn't ask for forgiveness. All she talked about was her desire to fix our relationship. She didn't try to kiss me. Although I was overwhelmed by everything happening, I began to understand. Her feelings for me were real. Linda was a smart, beautiful woman and the mother of our children. Deep down, I realized that she still loved me. Could I find someone better than her? Probably not. Could I find anyone who could even come close to her? Definitely not. The real question was whether I could forgive her. I didn't know the answer, but why not try? I made a choice. I said to her, "Linda, we are still married, and we need to talk about what happened and what will happen next. But let's leave the talk about the future for later, after this wonderful dinner. Doesn't that seem fair? She nodded in agreement and quietly said, "Yes." I continued, "Divorce is painful, and it's even harder now when I see how much you really love me and how deeply you regret what happened." Tears streamed down her face and she cried, "Every night I prayed that you would forgive me, that you'd give me another chance." I moved closer and hugged her. "We're still married. Shouldn't we seriously consider staying that way?" She looked into my eyes and quietly asked, "Is this real? Or am I dreaming?" "It's real," I told her, "because I want to believe that the Linda I knew before Martin is still here. I missed her more than you can imagine." She hugged me tightly and whispered, "You won't regret this." That night could only end one way, with deep, passionate intimacy. I did everything I could to make that night unforgettable for her, and she responded in kind. It was like we were reliving our wedding night. In the days and months that followed, it felt like we were newlyweds again. But the divorce happened. 2 months later, she accidentally ran into Martin and once again gave in to temptation. They ended up in a hotel room, unaware that I was tracking Linda's movements. That night, everything was decided. I burst into the room where they were passionately involved and recorded everything on my phone. "I'm sorry, darling, I didn't mean to. It was an accident," Linda shouted after me, but there was no second chance for her. In court, I won. I got 60% of all our savings and full custody of the children. I was furious with her, and in my anger, I sent the video of her and Martin in a compromising position to everyone who knew them. I did it so she could feel what I had felt. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. It was a dark and dreary day, one of those that sneaks up on you and leaves you utterly drained. In just a few minutes, everything I thought I had under control descended into chaos. Now, all I could do was wait, anxiously wondering if the nightmare I feared would come true. But dwelling on my failures wasn't in my nature. I wasn't raised to give in to despair. My old sergeant always drilled into me that action is the best defense. If there was nothing else left to salvage from this situation, at least I could fight for my dignity. Even if everything I valued was crumbling, I still had my pride. Luckily, I had received some important information the day before, which gave me a little time to prepare for what was coming. And so, I found myself sitting in my friend's car, hidden in a dark corner of a motel parking lot. I had heard rumors that my wife was supposed to arrive that day, and I nervously kept watch for her red convertible. I didn't have to wait long. She showed up, and right behind her came the man she had chosen to be with, an arrogant guy in a flashy convertible. He parked next to her, exchanged a few words with her, and headed inside to check in. This was my moment. I slipped out of the car, approached hers, and got into the unlocked passenger seat. She gasped in shock. "Connor, what are you doing here?" Keeping my cool, I handed her a brown envelope and said, "Nothing much, just delivering the divorce papers to my soon-to-be ex-wife. Enjoy your time with the real man, and don't worry about coming home." Her face turned pale and she stammered, "No, no, no! You've got it all wrong! This isn't what you think! Let me explain! There's no betrayal, I swear!" But I wasn't interested in listening. "I want a divorce, Margaret. I don't care about you and that coward who just went to get the key for your little getaway. Be with him if you want. I'm done." Tears began to fall from her eyes, and it was clear that her romantic fantasy with her so-called lover was crumbling before her eyes. At that moment, her lover reappeared, triumphantly waving the room key. His eyes met mine, and confusion spread across his face as he asked, "Who's this? What did he do to you?" Calmly, I got out of the car, pulling a small plastic bottle from my pocket. As I approached him, Margaret whispered through her sobs, "This is my husband, and he's divorcing me because of this." Angrily, the man barked, "I'll teach him a lesson for thinking like that." He moved toward me, but before he could do anything, I sprayed his face with a mixture of water and shampoo. Blinded and furious, he staggered back, screaming in pain. While he was disoriented, I moved on to the next part of my plan, a homemade dart with 3 sharp points. I approached him from behind and stuck the dart into his buttock, where it would stay until a surgeon removed it. Leaving him there, blinded by shampoo and with a dart lodged in his body, I turned and walked away as he cursed me in agony. Margaret was still sitting in the car, sobbing uncontrollably. Without another word, I got back in my car and drove off. Whatever happened that day, one thing was clear. Their romantic evening was completely ruined. This was the beginning of the end for me. My name is Connor Smith. I'm 42 years old, married to Margaret, who is 40. We have 2 children, Emile, who's 12, and Estelle, who's 9. We've been together for 20 years, 16 of them in marriage. On the surface, we had that perfect life, a stable family and a cozy home. But happiness? We never truly had it. In my opinion, most of our problems in the marriage stemmed from Margaret's mother. She wasn't a monster in the literal sense, but her cruelty was relentless. From the moment we met, she made it clear she had no sympathy for me. It all began with what should have been an ordinary family dinner. What I thought would be a friendly gathering turned into an interrogation. After a barrage of questions, Margaret's mother announced, "I don't like your name. Connor is such a common name. People from decent families don't name their children Connor, Kenny, Ronnie, Molly, Nellie, or Cindy." I sat there, stunned by her audacity. But what shocked me even more was Margaret's silence, and her timid father's too, as she insulted me. That's when I realized the problem wasn't just between me and Margaret. Her family would always be a source of trouble, and unfortunately, those problems never went away. She began her speech by noting that Smith was a surname widely spread among farming families and passed down through generations when such traditions were still customary. Then, she shifted her attention to Margaret, expressing disappointment, as she had envisioned a brighter future for her. This especially pertained to the fact that her other daughter, Natalie, was about to marry a man of noble descent. That was the final straw for me. I stood up and interrupted, "Isn't the father of that man an illegitimate child from a distant branch of the family? And doesn't he live on welfare without a job?" Before anyone could respond, I added, "I need some air." I turned to Margaret and asked, "Will you come with me?" To my surprise, she nodded and we left together, escaping what I perceived as a hostile atmosphere. I had known Natalie's fiancé Alexander since school, and it didn't surprise me that he had convinced Margaret's peculiar mother that he was the perfect match for Natalie. His charm was deceptive, but I couldn't care less. I wasn't invited to their grand wedding, which suited me just fine. I had no desire to attend. The only thing that truly mattered to me was my relationship with Margaret. Over time, it deepened, perhaps too much, as it eventually led to an unexpected pregnancy. When Margaret's mother found out, she was furious, hurling insults over the phone and making it clear that she would not be paying for the wedding. But we didn't care. We opted for a small ceremony with close friends and family. After the wedding, we both found excellent jobs in a city more than 30 miles away from our hometowns, which meant that I had minimal contact with her mother. Margaret's mother poured all her energy and resources into Natalie and Alexander. Shortly after the wedding, Margaret had a miscarriage, but we weathered that loss together. 3 years later, we had a son and then a daughter. Our life with 2 children was peaceful and successful. We earned well, bought a beautiful home, and built a strong circle of friends. Our relationship remained physically fulfilling, and the distance from Margaret's family minimized their influence. Her parents never visited us, and on the rare occasions we went home, I spent time with my own family while Margaret visited hers. Over time, even Alexander grew tired of dealing with his overbearing mother-in-law. Surprisingly, his career was flourishing, and when a new position required him to move nearly 50 miles away, he happily accepted. After several heated arguments, Alexander gave Natalie an ultimatum. Either she moved with him, or they would divorce. She followed him, and once they left, Margaret's mother suddenly remembered she had another daughter, Margaret. Daily phone calls began, in which Margaret's mother constantly criticized me, comparing everything I did, or didn't do, to the supposedly perfect life of Alexander and Natalie. Our relationship began to crack under this pressure. I told Margaret that the real reason Alexander left was to escape her toxic mother, but that only intensified our conflicts. Things got even worse when a new man appeared at Margaret's workplace, a man distantly related to an aristocratic family. She began to admire him, calling him a real man or even Superman, clearly comparing him to me. This man was married, but his wife worked abroad as a nurse in Asia and was due to return in a few months. They were planning to buy a house when she returned, but for now, he lived nearby, renting a room from his sister-in-law. Margaret's constant praise of him became unbearable for me. She criticized everything I did, from the way I talked to the way I dressed, always hinting that he was better at everything. Naturally, I couldn't win in these comparisons. Although our physical relationship continued, her enthusiasm noticeably waned. She started making comments like, "Again?" or "Don't you ever get tired?" If it weren't for our children and Margaret's many good qualities, I might have left long ago. She remained faithful, a great mother, a talented cook, and always took care of herself. We were a good team when it came to running the household and working in the garden, but her constant critical remarks and sharp words turned the woman I once adored into someone distant and unfamiliar. I wasn't the type to silently endure. I responded to her jabs, and our arguments only got worse. One evening, after the children were already asleep, she made another snide remark. "I wish you were more like my colleague." That was the final straw. My anger flared up. "If you're so in love with that guy, why don't you just run away with him? But if you cheat on me while we're still married, you won't get away with it. If he's bold enough to start something with you, I'll make sure he knows your services won't be free." Margaret exploded with rage, screaming, "You pathetic piece of trash! How dare you think of me that way? You'll regret this, mark my words." I calmly replied, "Wouldn't it be better if he paid instead of you?" I screamed in despair in response, but before she could throw more insults at me, our two frightened and tearful children ran up to us. My focus immediately shifted to calming them down as best as I could. After her outburst of anger, we entered a 2-week stretch of cold silence. On the first weekend, she took the kids to her parents, and on the next, we had guests, Natalie and Alexander. While they were with us, Margaret played the role of a loving wife and behaved affectionately towards me. But as soon as our guests left on Sunday morning, her attitude changed. As soon as we said goodbye to the guests, Margaret turned to me and said, "Don't think I'll be doing you any more favors." The situation only worsened by the day. By Thursday, I received an unexpected call at work from one of Margaret's colleagues. After introducing herself, she got straight to the point. "We've got a new guy in the office, very attractive, and now 3 of us, including your wife, are competing for his attention." We tried to remind her that she's married to a good man, but she didn't back down. Now she's boasting that she's won him over and is planning to meet him tomorrow at a motel. I thanked her for the warning and asked her to keep the conversation between us so I could handle the situation myself. That evening, when I returned home, Margaret seemed unusually cheerful, and I couldn't stop thinking about that phone call. I remembered something an old sergeant had once told me in the Army. He deeply admired the Apache warriors, who were known for their sudden ambushes. They would strike quickly and vanish into the desert. I wasn't one for physical violence, so I decided my best option was to use the element of surprise. Margaret once bragged that her lover had a black belt in some martial art, so I knew catching him off guard would be crucial. Ideally, I would have used pepper spray, but since it was illegal in our country, I had to improvise. After some thought, I settled on a small bottle of diluted shampoo. I tested it on myself and found it quite effective. The sergeant had also spoken about the fear Apache arrows with barbed heads instilled during the border wars. Though I couldn't use a bow and arrows, his words inspired me to head down to my workshop in the basement. I found an old dartboard and started working on my project. I attached small sewing needles at a slight angle to the ends of the darts to create a barbed effect. Pulling these darts out of soft tissue would probably require a hospital visit. I didn't test them on myself, so I hoped they would work when the time came. My plan was simple and didn't require any complex tools. I intended to serve Margaret and her lover with divorce papers, temporarily blind him, and then jab one of the barbed darts into his backside. I doubted he'd want to continue the affair after that. The next morning, Margaret dressed provocatively, but I pretended not to notice, and we had an ordinary Friday morning. Later at work, I swapped cars with my friend and colleague Eric, as we often did when he needed to use my larger vehicle. That morning, I stopped by the courthouse to pick up the divorce papers and filled them out during my work break. I was also able to contact the lover's wife, getting her email through a charity in Asia, and planned to inform her about the affair. During my lunch break, I drove past Margaret's office and saw both her car and her lover's in the parking lot. It was clear they had had lunch together and were heading to the motel. I bought a couple of hot dogs and drove to the motel to wait for their arrival. As expected, they arrived, and my plan unfolded exactly as I had envisioned. My time in the army had not been wasted, and I mentally thanked that old sergeant for his valuable lessons. Around 5:30 that day, I received another call from the woman who had told me about Margaret's affair. She asked, "Were you at the motel today? Did you find what you were looking for?" I replied, "Yes, I was there. But it seems my wife and her colleagues didn't appreciate my presence." I tried to lighten the mood by handing Margaret the divorce papers, but that didn't exactly improve her mood. Her lover became aggressive, and I had to defend myself. Let's just say he's now nursing some injuries in the lower part of his body, and I believe my wife took him to the hospital. In a dry tone, I added, "It wasn't exactly a romantic getaway for them, but yes, everything happened just as you heard. I have no reason to make this up." My wife still hadn't returned, so I suggested to the woman on the phone that she try to contact her directly. "Try calling her mobile," I said, adding, "but I can't guarantee you'll get the whole truth from her." The woman thanked me and asked for Margaret's number, which I gave without hesitation. I hoped their conversation would be civil. Then I sent a letter to the woman in Asia, the wife of Margaret's so-called real man, explaining the entire situation in detail. At 6 in the evening, Margaret entered the house, and I immediately knew she was furious. She glared at me and sharply said, "We need to talk, right now." I was ready. "Did you get everything you wanted from your lover?" I said. "But if you thought I'd stand idly by while you and he made a fool of me, you've gone mad." "No, Margaret." I wasn't going to allow my dignity to be trampled on. "Even if he didn't physically harm you, you hurt him enough that I had to take him to the hospital," she said, "and you'll pay for that." "Actually, we'll all pay for this. 4 adults and 2 children will share the burden of the chaos you've created with this guy," I added. "And if you think his poor wife in Asia is okay after reading my letter, think again. Now she knows exactly who she married." Margaret's voice rose. "Did you really send that letter to his innocent wife? That's cruel." She looked shocked at the mere mention of divorce. "I didn't threaten you with anything," I calmly replied. "Just sign the divorce papers, and in 6 months you'll have your freedom and a fair settlement." I warned her that if she tried to drag out the process with a lawyer, it would only cost her more, and the result would be the same. Reality started to sink in, and her eyes filled with tears. "My God, are you really serious? Please listen to me. I haven't done anything wrong." I cut her off. "Yes, you have. You took your domineering mother's side in her disdain for me just because I don't come from a wealthy family. You let her manipulate you into becoming a nagging wife, and then you started flirting with a colleague whom you've always considered superior to me, as you often said. I know you were competing with 2 other colleagues for the attention of this so-called real man. Then you left work early and went to a motel with him, cheating on me with a married man. You know how I feel about infidelity, so there's no misunderstanding about what comes next." Margaret cried even harder. "I didn't cheat on you today or ever. I only love you. What about our children?" she pleaded. "The children are the only reason I didn't kick you out long ago," I replied. "Every day I hear how I'm not good enough from you and your mother compared to this real man you were infatuated with. I know about the motel, I know about your plans, and I am deeply humiliated. I won't participate in this farce any longer." She realized the show was over, and we began discussing the divorce. Eventually, Margaret signed the papers, but with one condition: that we continue living in the same house and refrain from dating anyone else until the divorce was finalized in 6 months. It's been 6 weeks since I confronted Margaret about her near affair. Strangely, our marriage has taken an unexpected turn. Margaret now seems like a completely different, much better wife. It's as if she's forgotten how she used to treat me, as if I was worthless. We've started behaving more civilly, even doing more things together than we had in the months leading up to the revelation. Of course, we no longer share the same bed, or even the same room, but I don't miss the shallow affection she used to show. As strange as it may sound, I truly believe her when she says she never crossed the line with this real man. It seems their motel meeting was meant to kick off an affair, but they hadn't yet crossed that threshold. As for her real man, his wife filed for divorce and left him penniless. She recently wrote to me saying he's doing fine and that she's forgiven him. We still have 20 weeks left until the final divorce, and I'm not sure if I want to salvage our 16-year marriage. If she tried to cheat once, she'll do it again. When the time came to finalize the divorce, I signed the papers and divorced Margaret. The only thing that saddened me was the fact that I'd only be a weekend dad. That's life. I visited the kids on weekends, but that didn't last long. One autumn evening, I got a call from the police informing me that Margaret had been driving drunk, and the worst part was that our kids were in the car, putting them in danger. That's when Child Services granted me full custody of the kids. As for Margaret, a year later, she was no longer herself. She spent the entire year in a downward spiral of excessive drinking. She was punishing herself, and in the end, my revenge wasn't even necessary. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.